The passion, the energy, the power, the spirit of hardcore.
It's late 2021. Julian is lingering or bravely enduring at Belmarsh, the UK's high security prison. His health and legal situation are deteriorating rapidly. A group of crypto natives, also cypherpunks, gather online to fight, to come up with a way to fight for his freedom. We formed a DAO at the time, or I would say still, one of crypto's primary tool for coordination and capital formation. We raise more than 17,000 ETH. That at the time was around $54 million with one goal, and the goal was to free Julian Assange by any means necessary. In the following 2 years, the funds were used to fund all his legal campaigns. And yesterday we heard a very good presentation by that privacy girl on the case, so I'm not going to go much into it. Some legal costs were also paid from before because the Our Holland Foundation had advanced since 2019 a lot of the costs. Within 2 years, Julian was free, and I'd say that AssangeDAO freed Julian. I say that because without the contributions of 10,000 people, I say, and others might disagree, it wouldn't have been free. Because the legal campaign was incredibly expensive. And all of the money, nearly all of the money, came from the AssangeDAO. This is, however, what has happened is that while a lot has been written about Assange, not much has been, and it has been told about AssangeDAO, and if it was reported, there was a lot of misunderstanding and misreporting. So this is a small attempt of a series of documents that hopefully will clarify the situation as to what has happened with AssangeDAO. I'm a lawyer, so this is not legal advice. I'm not talking about this from a legal perspective. I usually always say that because people think I give legal advice on stage. So there has been reporting on the AssangeDAO, but it was often things like AssangeDAO sparks rug pull concerns with suspicious transfers. AssangeDAO rug pull. AssangeDAO member says 37 million spent on rescue Assange. There are a lot of reports like that. I just put a few of the last ones, which are probably the most relevant. Because it has been such a complicated matter, I got inspiration from these books. I recently got this gift gifted to me. It's called Quantum Computing for Babies. It also exists at Blockchain for Babies, Bitcoin for Babies, Neural Networks for Babies, everything for babies. And I think there should probably be a book, AssangeDAO for Babies. These books are extremely genius how they explain things. They're actually not that stupid, and this is not supposed to be an insult to the audience here. I know that you probably all know much more than the average person who reads the news on this matter. But before going to AssangeDAOs for Babies, we're going to speak, there should also be an Assange for Babies, and maybe that privacy girl wants to write that story. So I'm going to try to summarize the case. A lot of you probably were in saw the presentation yesterday, but the Assange story can also be simplified. And that is a recap for those who don't know that much about it and who weren't there yesterday. So Assange is an Australian programmer, journalist, and the founder of WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks is an organization that gathers and publishes secret information provided by whistleblowers and other unknown sources that show government misconduct, corruption, misconduct by all the powerful persons in this world. That, in Assange for Babies, angered some of the very large, powerful states. And to find protection from persecution, Julian sought asylum in the embassy of Ecuador from 2012 to 2019. And then in 2018, an indictment was entered. It was sealed at the time by a US court alleging that he was helping Chelsea Manning in accessing and hacking into a US computer. Later, those charges were expanded to adding 17 counts under the Espionage Act of 1917. Most interesting fact about that is that there's not been a publisher indicted under the Espionage Act for disclosing secret obtained information by a whistleblower. He faced up to 175 years in prison. After Ecuador revoked his asylum, he was arrested in April 2019 and was held for more than 5 years in Belmarsh. He was released on the 24th of June 2024, pursuing a plea agreement with the US. In this agreement, he pleaded guilty to one charge of conspiracy for disclosing national defense information. This was under the Espionage Act. He was sentenced to time served. At that point, Julian chose freedom over seeking justice. So, to sum this up, Assange was and is being prosecuted for journalism. The case shows and is emblematic for the erosion of justice, erosion of human rights, and press freedom worldwide. It highlights the deep flaws of the British justice system, of the Swedish justice system, and also the US justice system. And it shows, Assange called it actually transnational repression. The case has encouraged, over the last 13 years, a climate of self-censorship, which affects journalists all around the world. When nowadays people report, or journalists report if they report, in Orwellian newspeak on the war crimes being live streamed to us. As Assange himself noted in the hearing, when the collateral murder video came out, people were actually shocked what had happened. Nowadays, no one is shocked by this anymore. So, I also put Pompeo up here because that's the moment he says that it's a non-state hostile intelligence service, WikiLeaks. Now, let's go back to the AssangeDAO. Oh, wait, I put this here. This is a diagram made by Holland Foundation on the legal case, and this is just the British one, the English one. You see how complex it is. That's the only reason why I put it there. So let's go back to the AssangeDAO. So Julian was lingering in prison, he was sick. The US had just won an appeal to extradite him to the US. Assange's campaign was mainly paid by the Holland Foundation in Germany, and they were running out of funds. Indeed, they had advanced funds for 3 years because they hadn't raised enough to actually fund the costs they had, which were between 50,000 K and 200,000 K for each of those years. We realized to have a chance against the US in these kind of proceedings, he needed a lot of money, because you're fighting a party that has endless resources in court. So they can use all kinds of strategies to make this more expensive for you and for you to actually not be able to defend it just because of the legal costs that this costs. So at the time this happened, there was a DAO that formed to raise funds for Ross Ulbricht, the founder of Silk Road, to free him. And so we got inspired by that. Ross Ulbricht, for the information of people who don't know, I think you guys know, he's serving a double life sentence without parole, plus 40 years at the moment for having maintained and founded Silk Road. So we also formed a DAO, and we needed to raise funds for lawyers. Lawyers want to be paid in fiat. The crypto community likes to make donations in crypto, and that if it is for some controversial cause, such as helping Julian Assange, a lot of them probably also anon, without having to identify themselves, or at least pseudo-anon from their wallet address. So at the time already, in 2022, the AML, the anti-money laundering laws, were tightened significantly. So if you want to ensure that Julian Assange would have funds to spend for his lawyers who want to be paid in fiat, you need to make sure that those funds are bankable. So the idea, and this is the structure diagram, this was what actually happened in the end, is that the AssangeDAO raises ETH on Juicebox. At the time, Assange and Pak were working on an NFT together, and the idea was to raise funds that way. So the idea became to bid on the Pak NFT with the funds raised. Pak, a company, would then transfer, and we get the NFT, Pak gets the money, Pak then transfers, donates the funds to Holland Foundation, which administers Julian's defense. They would then have to just KYC Pak. Who's Pak? They would just need to know that and not who are these people. And Wow Holland Foundation then pays fiat to these lawyers. Obviously, there were also some people who actually accepted ETH. I mean, there's the US lawyer took ETH. An easy way in 2022 to raise funds for causes, for impact causes was, or any kind of causes to be honest, was Juicebox money. Juicebox exists still. At the time, the only way, there was one way to deal with this, one auction way, so you basically raise funds, and for every fund donated, you would get a certain amount of token issued. So this shows the number, and I'm going to explain why this is higher than what was transferred to Wow Holland in a sec. This Juicebox had also been used recently, and like in 2022 at the time, it was used by AssangeDAO, which also made it into the mainstream media. So people were well acquainted with how this works, and that also allowed people such like non-crypto natives, people who had were novices, new in crypto, to actually make donations on this site. It has a really nice feature where you could leave some text, you know, say free Assange, or say whatever you want on it when you made your donation, and you got a token in for the donations you made. Our token was justice token. So this raise went extremely well. We didn't actually expect to raise 17,000 ETH, which are the 54 million. It got a lot of attention in the media, and within a short period of time, this Discord, like whatever we had, like Telegram, was sprawling with people, bots, armies. There were threats to the team. It was getting rather dangerous a bit, I would say. People also had disagreements on how this would go. In addition to this, so we did the raise, and then the governance we adopted was a safe multisig plus snapshot. Snapshot where governance token holders would be able to vote on. It was also at the time a very common structure. It was an agile structure that could be adopted quite quickly. And we actually had to do it quickly because the artist who made the NFT, it came to a little bit a surprise to us, and we had like 2 weeks to set this all up in the end, 10 days actually. They didn't agree to reschedule it to some time later because it conflicted with the other drops. So there was a need to set it up quickly. I'd like to discuss the interaction, because this is always where the info gets lost, between the fundraise and the actual bidding on the NFT. So Assange, like PAC, set up a separate website called Censored Art, which used the manifold smart contracts for the auction. That was set up, and the auction ran from the 7th of February to the 9th of February here. And when it was started, it couldn't be stopped. The auction was running, so because it's a smart contract-based platform. So we had 2 funding cycles. We started on the 3rd of February. We deployed on Juicebox money. There's 1 funding cycle. But with Juicebox, what happens is if you don't make any you don't put any extras into it, you don't set a stop to the funding cycle, what happens if you set your funding cycle to be 3 days, it renews automatically every 3 days. So this wasn't entirely clear, at least not to me. I think it wasn't clear to us at the time. So we realized, oh, there's one funding cycle, and then on the 6th, a second funding cycle starts. What we did is, we realized, well, this needs to finish prior to the end of the auction on 9th February at 2 p.m. We've shortened the funding cycle because when you have the funding cycle running on Juicebox, you can actually not issue the token while the funding cycle is running. The token can only be issued after. So the governance of the DAO could only be functional after the auction, or just about when the auction ends. We realized that, however, only that this would be necessary, that it was important to have the governance going before the auction ends, later. It wasn't, we didn't realize it at the time. We shortened it so it would actually stop prior to the auction ending. So on the 7th of February, the auction started, and what became clear pretty quickly is that there were no many other bidders. In fact, there were just 2 who bid against AssangeDAO. There was one Anon wallet that bid at the beginning, and after that, we just had fun with Jesse Powell from Kraken, who bid against us. So there are reasons why this is the case. Because, one reason is, at that time in 2022, it was in a bull market, the gas prices were very high. On Manifold, you actually have to pay gas fees to bid on the auction. If you everyone knew that we had like so much money to bid, and people also believed that we would bid all the money on the NFT, why would you try to bid if you didn't if you knew that you'd lose, because you'd have to pay all these massive gas fees of like hundreds of dollars. The other reason was there were actually whales that were interested a bit, but it was too controversial for them to do that. And while we had set up a way, you could use Tornado Cash, wasn't sanctioned at the time, you could use Tornado Cash, put your money through Tornado Cash, and then actually donate anonymously. However, if you're a whale and you bid millions on this, it's very hard to actually hide or like anonymize the millions you have. So I think those were the main reasons why there weren't many bidders, and the other one was because it was a bespoke platform that was just put up for the censored art auction. Then, after the auction finishes, the token was deployed, and people could start claiming it from the Juicebox site. The auction ended. We win the auction, obviously, because there were no other bidders. PAC gets the money. We bid the net, because Juicebox actually took a fee of 5%. So while it was 17,000 ETH, so there's a lot of discussions on this. This is why I'm getting a bit detailed about this. This is the net proceed, 5% less we had those ETH. These also included some of, I think they also included some of the team. But basically, PAC gets these 16,593 ETH, and he then sends them a month later to Wow Holland Foundation's multisig. And this is how the money ended up funding Julian's freedom. what I want to say here is like the AssangeDAO this way is basically the DAO that had actually a real world high stakes impact. I think there's not been any DAO that actually has achieved that. We freed Assange. So on this timeline, and I'm going to go into this in more detail, and we are far away from the Assange for Babies by now. But basically, Juicebox, while they took those 5%, we were actually, I at least remember this, we were promised the 5% back, but we need to ask the DAO, and the founder thought that likely we'd get it back. But what we got was these Juicebox tokens. 87 million of Juicebox tokens, which in May the DAO voted to change into 298 ETH on the Juicebox bonding curve. So after the transfer, or like the bidding on the NFT, the DAO had around 200 ETH left for other funding, whereas all the other money was in Wow Holland. This is a short summary. What is noteworthy is in relation to Assange, it's grassroots movements that freed him. And I mean, the AssangeDAO was one grassroots movement. It's not just the multi-stakeholders, it was 10,000 contributors that contributed to this. This is the NFT. I chose here 2 renderings I found. Right now, it's actually on 82. That is incorrect because the NFT requires PAC to, what I understand, and I'm happily be corrected if someone knows that this is not the case, it has to be manually changed, and it has to be changed every day, because what this NFT does, it counts the days of the prison time of Julian. So yesterday, that privacy girl said, you know, he was persecuted for 5,000 days. The NFT only starts counting from the time he was in prison in Belmarsh. Last time I checked, this PAC hadn't updated our $54 million NFT, which was supposed to be updated every day, and it stopped here. Was updated one more time before, and then now, this is today, it says 82. It was updated 19 days ago, so now it should read 101, and hopefully soon PAC will update that, so you have actually the NFT saying the right days, because now it counts forward. So this is from the time before when Julian was in prison, and this is now counting the days of freedom. That's just to show again, like the AssangeDAO wallet, because a lot of media gets this wrong, because they think the Wow Holland wallet is our wallet, but the AssangeDAO wallet is this one, and we have here the 198 ETH in the fund. So since between our race and now, 12,911 ETH has been spent on his legal campaign. This is at least what you can see from the Wow Holland Foundation multisig, what has flown out. It's also corroborated by a report they issued after some pressure by persons to have a transparency report on how these funds have actually been spent. Some of the notable proceedings that have been paid for is the English High Court proceeding, the diagram you saw earlier, the preparation for the European Court of Human Rights, the Spanish proceedings, the US proceedings, the political campaign in Australia, and the negotiations in the US to drop the charges which are ongoing now, including the plea agreement. I say this without really fully knowing this, because Holland haven't made this clear what has been paid. This is just what I believe has been paid and what other people have told me has been paid by Holland. And there are many others, and I'm waiting for a report which actually sets out what has been spent on this. So now I'm coming to the challenges that Assange has faced. I summarized this all without mentioning the main issue we've had for the last 2 years. And this relates to the bid. This is also why I showed you the bidding behavior and the timeline. There's basically, we were pretty unified in everything. People who donated, the core team. However, where we were not unified, and that only became clear during the bidding, is this a max bid? Was this just a collective that banded together for a single purpose to basically bid on the NFT, all the money we had? Or was this bid as a normal, was this a DAO that was actually supposed to continue for a long time and support Julian, empower with this treasury to, by all means necessary, to free Assange? And that split became clear when we in this auction, after the auction had started, or just before the auction started, and we tried to get it delayed. It was not possible because of this. Because what was clear was that we couldn't ask the justice token holders for an opinion on this matter because of the timeline we had here. And even after the lock, there seems to be, and I haven't fully, seems to be some time, but it was just not enough to ask 10,000 contributors what should be the bidding strategy before the end of the auction, when we realized that there is no one bidding against us and there need to be a decision made whether we're just going to bid 4,000 ETH. Jesse Powell's last bid was 4,000 ETH, or would we bid the 16,000 ETH, all the treasury on it? This actually goes to the heart of what it means to be a DAO. Was it because a DAO, is supposed to be an organization that lives on, that makes decisions together? By making this decision, we basically, in a way, had to disregard the DAO, like the token holders, on what to do in relation to this. As you know, what has happened is that the max bid was placed. And also the people who supported the max bid, there's a multisig of 5 people, left immediately after. So that was in line with that. You can summarize some of the advantages for max bid and bidding as necessary. So the pro max bid said, well, it was clearly communicated that you would bid on the NFT with all your treasury. So there were some tweets that said, oh, we're going to bid on this. There's also, as you could see during those days, is that our website was taken down continuously. Discord was unmanageable. There were people in the DAO, interfering with the DAO, that really made life, even in real life, not just difficult, dangerous for the people who were involved in this. And so, as a pro-max bid argument is to say that, there were the DAO, because of its permissionlessness, of its transparency, was vulnerable to state actor interferences, any kind of interferences. Most of the people were doxxed on the DAO, which made this a short opportunity or a small window to get the funds into safety to Wow Holland Foundation, where it could be within a proper legal structure. Also, the Assange case was enormously complex. We didn't know whether even 54 million would be sufficient to actually get him out. So there was a good reason why this should be the case. And Wow Holland had the full capacity to actually manage the funds and take care of that, because they had administered the funds already for Julian since I think it's 2019. On the bid as necessary side, the goal of the DAO was not to bid all the money on an NFT that didn't even update properly and could be written in one line of bash code. It was to free Assange by any means necessary. And also, DAOs are supposed to be decentralized and transparent, whereas a foundation usually is quite a secretive organization, and you get very little information out of them on how they spend their funds. So this was in direct opposition to what the DAO should stand for. Also, there were 10,000 contributors. There were people who were like-minded. There were very technically able persons who could actually have made a huge difference to the campaign. Also, there weren't like a bureaucratic organization where every invoice needs to be shown. There were no limits as to how the DAO could have spent those funds. Also, it wasn't a positive thing to sell an NFT for 50 million or like to buy an NFT for 50 million. Yes, that gave some publicity. It was in the news, it was on Forbes, it was on Wired. But the pressure to put, or the vanity to have this NFT be so expensive shouldn't really pressure the DAO into submission and put the max bid. So the anti-max bid pro vote saw this as a missed opportunity to actually showcase what this community the crypto community could do with the tech available. However, what we also realized is that a lot of the tech wasn't available. I'm going to talk about this in a bit. So the decision was split. There were 2 in favor and 2 against. Members authored a proposal to actually ask the community to vote on this, independent of whether the treasury the auction would stop and we wouldn't have bid. But we had a governance structure which mirrors the one of the Free Ross DAO, where the family has a say. And so we had the consensus units for review that can accept a proposal going forward or not. This makes sense because, of course, you don't want a DAO that calls itself AssangeDAO threaten or somehow negatively impact the Assange legal case or the campaign. So it was, given that we used the name of Assange, it made sense to give the Assange family a veto right in the DAO structure. So in the end, there were 2 against 2, and the third person looked at this, or everyone looked at this, and the proposal couldn't go ahead, so the max bid was placed. as I mentioned, there are good reasons why you would not, or at the time in 2022, we didn't have the tools available for some to have an organization that supports the most reviled, the most persecuted person on earth or journalist by the US. We didn't have the tools to perhaps to make this a possibility without there being a lot of interferences. So over the next 2 years, not just because of the bidding strategy that was adopted, but also because of like the cause, what happened was our infrastructure was taken down. There were governance issues. We had the Discord bots. There were threats and attacks on DAO members. One DAO member ended up in hospital over several months. There were misinformation campaigns. It was difficult to correct anything that the media said. And also there were, because it was permissionless, there were members who brought disrepute to the DAO because it was not clear who these people were, and later it turned out, well, there are some members who maybe we wouldn't want to have had at the time. It's like, so I wanted to provide more information on this, on the case, but I actually don't have the information because when we placed the bid, we bought the NFT, we handed over the administration of the funds, and while we thought that there would be like regular updates on what was being funded, that didn't really happen. So for 2 years, for me, it was a challenge, and I felt morally obliged. I felt obliged to give the DAO updates on this, but there wasn't really an opportunity to give updates on this because, well, I didn't know. So between that time, and there's good reason why I see why there were good reasons to be a black box. As the Julian's case was still ongoing, you didn't want to divulge information into the public that could potentially affect the legal case that was ongoing. So after Julian was freed on the 24th of June, they published, after some pressure, and I think also because they wanted it, a preliminary transparency report. And from that report, you see that these 12,000 ETH were spent. That information you also had from the on-chain funds. You could see it on their wallet address. So for me to say it's a full black box is probably not true. It was a partial black box because all that was known was the outgoings. And that actually spurred the rumors on the AssangeDAO, because you could see on-chain that, yes, okay, they're offboarding 150 ETH regularly. Where is all of this going? So at the very beginning, you saw this slide where people are accusing AssangeDAO of a rug pull that's spurred by the fact that you have this Ethereum Gnosis multi-sig wallet, and you see the outgoings. At the beginning, it was worth 56 million, and then it goes through, and it offboards even in the biggest winter, in a crypto winter when ETH was worth very little. So overall, from this report, we know that the 12,000 something ETH was turned into 16 million euros in payment to lawyers and campaigns. This is, and to the defense of Holland, they also only got the funds from on the 13th of March. At that time, ETH had fallen already a little. It was 42 million at the time. And then, as you all know, there was a crash that came, and there was no treasury management adopted by Holland, so they only had the ETH. and the lawyers needed to be paid even in crypto winter because Julian's case was going on in crypto winter. So I'm actually making this presentation here because I think these matters should be clarified. I feel there is a moral obligation to clarify those members for the 10,000 contributors to the DAO. However, while I had been trying to do this for 2 years, I actually didn't get any answers, and in August, they sent me this message saying, we do not see a need for coordination at this moment in time, when I had asked for a call to get some updates as to what was going on, to update the DAO. This is the original, the German, and I translated it for you. And also the legalese here on German foundation law, I hadn't asked to have third parties involved. I had asked for a call, and yes, it would be good to have Julian and other third parties, DAO, PAC, to make have some input on a decision, or what's going to happen with the remaining funds. Because as we speak, there are funds remaining. At the time of when he was freed, right now there are 681 ETH left in the treasury. When Julian was freed, it was 700 ETH more. Let me see, is that correct? Yeah, and so I want answers on what has happened, especially also to this. There's a reserve. It's common for organizations to take a fee for administering it. So Wow Holland took a 5% fee from those 54 million, which is around 2 million when they took it. And the reserve, there's still this amount left at this today. I mean, this was just taken yesterday. I think there should be a clarification on what is a reserve, what is a Rücklage in German. What they said in their preliminary report is that they use this for travel expenses, infrastructure, and office costs. And there's a lot, I mean, there's some leftovers. There was an absence of treasury management, and I like to know why, because I mean, they had this reserve to pay services, to passively manage the treasury. Didn't happen. So these are the funds are continuing to flowing out. Now there is no more reason not to disclose what those funds are being but what they're, at least I can't see them, or at least I'd like to know why there's no update on what these funds are being spent on. They're every few weeks, there are funds still flowing out of it. Until August, this was explained because lawyers hadn't submitted their invoices until the end of August. So they got, even though a lot of the legal work incurred earlier, it was only, you know, they only got the invoices late, and then they had to pay it, and that's why there was money going out. So a lot of the community has asked this question, why is this? This is okay. It was until August. I assume actually that all the others that have been going out here in September, on the 18th of September, it's the same, still paying legal fees. However, it would be nice to know. So these were some of the challenges, and I mentioned this challenge because I think it should be resolved. Now, what is going to happen to the AssangeDAO? And it is still, I mean, we still have $500,000, 200 ETH in the treasury. There's a question on the future of the funds remaining in Wow Holland and what the AssangeDAO can do now. Julian Assange at the time when we did the race was very interested, and the hope of the community is that he will get in get into it. A proposal has been made by Amir Taki as to how he could actually use the AssangeDAO, given that he cannot even make a FOIA request anymore and has maybe less of a voice, so he can get other people to speak up for him. AssangeDAO could potentially do that. Other members in the community have suggested that AssangeDAO should start funding cypherpunk projects that are aligned with Assange. Others have suggested, let's just liquidate it and that's it. At this moment in time, the DAO is going through restructuring, and we are trying to put a governance, implement a new governance form that is more in line with the tech we have in 2024. And also to solve this question, because obviously we succeeded in freeing Julian. That was the mission statement: by all means possible, necessary. And therefore, now it's actually time for the community to think about it, and we'd love other people to get involved on this question. And that's it. And I would appreciate questions on this presentation.
Hi, thank you. Nice presentation. I am curious about, since you're a lawyer, is there something special about the NFT that causes for the KYC stuff to behave differently? Because you mentioned in one of these slides that the Valhalla Foundation has a multi-sig address, so it seems, I mean, more straightforward to just send the money to the multi-sig, right?
Yeah.
Or for the DAO to simply send the money to the multi-sig without the NFT. What is the whole governance process and the auction with the 5% fee? Is this creating some new type of legal situation with KYC obligations? Do you in general need KYC to donate to charities?
So you're suggesting that the easiest way should have been Park sells the NFT and gets the money directly. I think you do not create, like, I think funds were actually sent directly, and the Valhalla Foundation sent, I mean, so we, like, so what you're saying, okay. What you're saying is that the AssangeDAO could have raised all these funds on Juicebox or somewhere else. In the multisig, we could have raised it in our no safe multisig, and then send that directly to the Valhalla Foundation. The issue with that is usually, first of all, the NFT was being prepared by Assange. The second reason, if you did that, of course, you could just say, okay, guys, we're raising funds for Valhalla Foundation for legal defense. Please donate. Can you please all provide your KYC, like your know your customer information, or at least some on-chain form of a KYC, which now in 2024 exists. Some people, but if you go to Juicebox nowadays, you end up with this ability. But if you want to pay lawyers through like an account, you usually need to show where your funds come from. And where do you going to say your funds come from? You're going to say they're going to come from anon sources, which is a problem, and therefore a lot of the centralized exchanges, banks will not accept your money. So your ETH is kind of less, is not worth the money. You could then go over-the-counter deals. You could do some over-the-counter deals where you find people who are going to give you the fiat you need, because the lawyers didn't pay for this.
Check.
I'm not sure this answered your question.
Can I?
But there's another reason you wanted to actually have a race like this. But one of the main one, I mean, the legal, and I'm a lawyer, so I'm focusing in this presentation on the legal, and other members of the DAO would frame this very differently. However,
Which one? This one?
AssangeDAO giving to Val Holland Foundation would have meant that these people need to be KYC'd.
Okay. Please have that conversation afterwards. I'd like to have other questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the ongoing tornado cast situation and kind of some similarities and differences you see with that case, especially in terms of AssangeDAO obviously being very successful with raising money, but Tornado Cash maybe not as successful. What if you hear your thoughts on that?
At the time we did this race, Tornado Cash was still legal and people could actually use it to make their funds anon. Tornado Cash was sanctioned, I mean, it's very different. We are basically, this is an impact DAO, raising funds for Julian Assange's legal defense. Tornado Cash, and I gave a talk last year about that. Tornado Cash is a privacy tool, and they are the US authorities and the Dutch authorities went after them because they enabled money laundering and mainly because of the Lazarus Group. Obviously, I think that is wrong and the legal case is wrong and it sends a chilling effect to all developers that you can no longer build these tools because you're going to end up in prison. And Alex is already supposed to serve 5 years, 64 months in prison for having built an open source tool. So I think there are very different cases. At the time, we were actually lucky to be able to use Tornado Cash. There were two main privacy tools you could use to not disclose your identity for the donations. And that was at the time CK Sync and Tornado. Did I say this correctly? Oh. Yeah, CK Money and Tornado you could use. Nowadays, the abilities are much more restricted.
I have two questions that are one question, censorship. The question is, I didn't understand if you didn't go with the max bid, if it was like the...
Sorry, can you speak up? Sorry.
The question is, I didn't understand if you didn't go with the max bid, like if you went with the 4,000 bid, would that mean that the remaining 12,000 would have stayed with the DAO and you had to manage like how they work because they wouldn't go straight to the foundation, and that was a problem for you because of all the risks?
Yeah, so if the max bid would haven't been placed, you'd have the bid would have been just above the second bid, right? Because you see the second bid, Jesse Powell bid 4,000 and something ETH, so the max bid would have been slightly above. That is the normal behavior you have in auctions. So you would have a remainder of the funds. At that point, the community, because the justice token would have been released, the community would have been able to vote on what to do with it, including sending them back to the persons who have donated for it, or keep it in the treasury and enable other cypherpunk methods to help freeing Assange, or paying the lawyers directly and paying campaigns without the bureaucracy of legacy institutions.
Hi. Yeah, so I gave the presentation yesterday, and so I just want to say I would be interested in writing a Assange for Babies book, although I would want to include a disclaimer: do not show this to your child before they're going to bed because it may cause nightmares.
Nice.
And I also thought you did a great job giving context to all of the parties, and I kind of just wanted to add a bit more to that, especially if anybody doesn't know the Val Holland Foundation very well. It was originally co-founded by Val Holland, the Val Holland is named after Val Holland, who co-founded the Chaos Computer Club back in the 1980s. And the foundation was named after him. And for anybody who doesn't know, I mean, if you can see on the website who the board members are, but part of the reason there was so much, and I think also still is, secrecy around this, I would assume, is at least one of the board members has been public about the fact that he was actually directly targeted during the course of this case, because actually Valholland has been accepting donations on behalf of WikiLeaks since 2009, even before the banking blockade started. So and enabling bankability was actually a big part of their contribution, being a foundation, accepting money when WikiLeaks couldn't and were being threatened. And as a result of that, they were targeted. The lawyers were targeted. The most famous one was our Garzón, originally a Spanish judge, and he actually had his offices broken into. So all of these people were being targeted in various ways. So I would completely understand why we want more information. I mean, I want more information, but I also think it's not only just foundation law and German tax law, it's also just because they've spent like almost 2 decades, dealing with various threats related to the case. And so they're probably waiting for a point where they're not worried about any more threats if they share information. So I just wanted to add that.
No, I fully understand that. I mean, we saw it when we did the race. The more money we got, the more interferences, even in real life, we got from people. It got really scary. So I fully understand that they have been doing this for 2 decades. So thank you so much for providing more background on that.
This will be our final question, and then we'll move on to the panel.
Thank you, Silke, for bringing clarity. Assange is out. Massive congratulations. So kind of like a question which comes to mind, what is the legal blockage for Van Halen to just wire the remaining funds to him so we can relax a bit after being out of prison? A following question, did the DAO think about actually putting the NFT back to the auction? We got 10,000 owners of seemingly useless NFT, which was bidded for 17,000 ETH. What about just put it to some other auction and hope that some art collector will just buy it and then the DAO gets more funds and can rock and roll? So
if you see the NFT is actually on OpenSea and currently being bid for is like 0.007 ETH. And I do think there will be an ability to get more than that because these are automatic bids and this NFT is one out of the censored collection. So the floor price is basically dictated by any of the transfers that happens on platforms like that. However, I mean, the NFT doesn't even update itself. You have to get PAC to do it manually, apparently, every day, which isn't happening. So the idea to sell it was, there have been people who have suggested it, but the way the auction has brought so much trouble to the DAO that there was not we were not able so far to fix governance. And right now we're trying to fix governance so people can make decisions like that. We still have the NFT in our multisig. So with the NFT and the 200 ETH. So if you want to actually propose that, we would be very grateful you make this community proposal.
Thank you so much. And if you have any additional questions, please speak with her afterwards.
Yeah, you can reach me via... Oops, it's no longer working. Anyhow, you can reach me under Silke Noa on Telegram, on Twitter, and a few other channels.